Jay Berwanger, a college star from the University of Chicago. For his stellar play in 1935, Berwanger received a trophy from New York's Downtown Athletic Club, a symbol of excellence later renamed the Heisman Trophy. As a last-place team in 35, the Philadelphia Eagles were the first team in line to make a selection, and it was Jay Berwanger. But then, the top pick made a salary demand that was too high for the Eagles to satisfy. Philly traded his negotiating rights to the Bears. Berwanger wanted $1,000 per game. Most players of that time were lucky to make $50. With his hardball approach, the Bears parted ways with Berwanger, and his NFL career was over before it even began.
Halas would have gone along with the idea for the draft, and so Philadelphia selected Jay Berwanger with their first pick, but he wouldn't sign with the Eagles. He wanted $1,000 per game to play in 1936, and the way I understand it is an average salary for players would be $1,000 per year, not per game.
Well, they traded his rights to the Bears, again, because they would have the money, and Jay having a Chicago connection. Unfortunately, Jay wanted more money than the Bears, than George Halas was willing to pay as well. He ultimately wanted to be able to compete in the 1936 Olympics. And if he took money, he would no longer, like a Jim Thorpe, he would no longer be an amateur. So he wanted to put that off or somehow be able to play in the Olympics. And then he did talk to the Bears. And one account says he always did regret never going into the NFL. But, you know, they were a couple bucks apart, and it just never happened.
Another top prospect was born in a region of mountaineers, where mining and steel were a living, and football was a passion. Joe Stuydehaar played football with blue-collar pride at the University of West Virginia. At 6'4", 236 pounds, his nickname was Jumbo Joe. Although playing tackle didn't garner the most attention, it certainly did for the team that was sixth in line to pick a player. Joe Stuydehaar is a pioneer in more ways than one as the Bears' first ever draft choice. As a constant force of 3 championship Bears teams, he is also the first player of the draft era to ever be inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Joe Stuydehaar, what I know is the Bears had a current player named Bill Carr that was from West Virginia also. So due to this connection, Bill Carr that played end for the Bears, he said you really should check out Stuydehaar from West Virginia. And I guess Halas really liked to stick to bringing in big name players. He was probably most familiar with the Big Ten since he went to Illinois, and he kept a great connection there and in the Midwest. But the Bears drafted Stuydehaar with their first pick. And the thing about Stuydehaar is he was 6'4" and 240 pounds in 1936, and as I understand it, a lot of people weren't 6'4" and 240 pounds in 1936.
It was the draft that helped the Bears build a supreme team, with 4 championships between 1940 and 1946. And it happened with other promising draftees who made true on their expectations. On the front line with Joe Stuydehaar was a fellow pick in that first draft class of 36, guard Danny Fortman. In 1939, the Bears had 2 first-round draft picks who added to their fortunes. Fullback Bill Osmanski, and their first choice, second overall, was quarterback Sid Luckman.
He had incredible games. I mean, he was also almost as good a defensive back as he was a quarterback. But he also was playing along with a whole lot of stars. But he was a fit for the T formation, where they were looking for a quarterback who was not just a blocker and the single wing or the different formations. He really fit what George Halas was trying to get along to with the Bears.
The Bears were good for a long time because of Sid Luckman. I mean, you know, you got to put him down as one of the top 5 quarterbacks to play the game, and if you put him in context of his era, in other words, the guys that could really throw the ball. You know, remember, the footballs weren't those exactly nicely pointed, always, you know, uniformly inflated or deflated footballs that they are these days. So Luckman was throwing what, you know, on a wet day could be a rock.
Luckman comes into a team with a host of Hall of Famers. And that's what when you have the dynasty, if you will. Plus, unfortunately, for the reality was a lot of the good players from teams went into the war, as did a lot of the Bears guys too. So it was an interesting time, but it was all done through the draft. No longer, because the draft was now set up, you couldn't just go buy those guys. You couldn't just go buy Red Grange if you really wanted it.